Today on CityCast Chicago, the team is all together after a long, restful break, and we're looking back on some key stories from the week, including CPS continues to struggle with its data trackers, the Cook County opioid crisis sets record numbers, and Chicago will soon have its first ever poet laureate. We're talking about all that and more with lead producer Carrie Shepard and producer Simone Alisea. It's Friday, January 6th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is CityCast Chicago. It's another Friday, so we're breaking down some key stories from the week. Helping me do that is lead producer Carrie Shepard and producer Simone Alisea, who I'm going to pass over the host chair this morning. How y'all feeling today?
Fine. Hey, Happy New Year.
Feeling good.
Happy New Year. I mean, we've already talked like multiple times this week, but Happy New Year on mic.
Happy New Year to our listeners.
Yeah, Happy New Year
that Simone and I have not spoken to yet, but certainly, Jacoby, you have. But still, Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023. It's going to be a big year in Chicago.
Oh, it's going to be a great year.
There's definitely no one I would rather look at a Chicago news with in this first week of the year than you, Jacoby, and you, Carrie. But before we get to the news, I am really curious to know, what was your favorite thing that you did over the holiday? My holiday was very, very low key, so I kind of need to live vicariously. Jacoby, what was your favorite thing you did over the holiday?
I'm gonna be selfish with this. In addition to getting a lot of rest, most days I've taken off all of 2022. I got some pretty dope gifts for my people over the holiday break. My mom got me a nice bag. Friends got me like cool books, and my homie Darius got me this great kind of travel bag that's got my name on it and a really cool robe.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then my homie got me this like collection of Goofy movie toys because they know how much I love the Goofy movie. And so they went on eBay and just got apparently like this Burger King collection. It was very like $12-15, but there are all these toys that came out when the Goofy movie came out, which is my favorite animated movie of all time. And so I just got some really special
literally
gifts.
The character Goofy, not like a Goofy
movie.
Like
the Goofy movie. And Atlanta did a whole like spoof documentary about it being the blackest movie Disney ever made, which I always thought as a kid. And so somebody just paying attention enough to give me those little toys was really sweet. So, you know, I'm grateful for the gifts my people got. I thought I gave some good ones too, but my favorite thing was receiving. I'm not gonna lie.
Carrie, what was your favorite thing that you did over the holiday break?
Well, I was just looking at my phone calendar and noticed I had all these plans, which is rare. I had, got drinks with friends, went to lunch on New Year's Eve in the West Loop at 3 p.m. Let me tell you, that is the way to go. You go at 3 p.m., you get out of there, you're home by like 6 o'clock. It's beautiful. And it was a nice day, so we got to walk a lot. I think my favorite thing is I went back home to see my family and then also had a really lovely lunch with my friends, my closest friends with whom I've been friends like 30 years. We just in our hometown, and it was wonderful, and it was great to sit there and catch up as adults because there's usually like kids running around, and it just felt really rejuvenating to all be together again after years of not being able to do that. We felt like, wow, we get to sit close to each other and share the same air, and so that was definitely a highlight.
Nice. That's really sweet. I'm really glad you got to do that. And really glad that you guys got some stuff, got some rest. That's what the holiday
I got
break
good gifts and gave
is
terrible
all about.
gifts. I just want to say for the record.
You did not give terrible gifts, Carrie. As someone who received a gift from you, you did not give terrible gifts.
Simone, one of them didn't come till the 30th. Another never showed up. So I'm going to go ahead and say my gift giving was a little flawed this year.
It's okay. It's a new year. There's always time in 2023 to get it right. The other thing we're looking at here in this first week of 2023, Chicago did not take a break in terms of news. It was very busy. And so we're going to dive into some of these stories. Jacoby, what was that top story for you as we come back into this year?
So for me this year, I went back to class as a teacher and had to start. And so I was thinking a lot about the kind of back to school mentality. And CPS students are going to go back to school on Monday, but it feels like deja vu because last year at this time we were talking about the kind of flaw in tracking data, particularly around CPS and vaccinations and COVID infections. And now as we're coming back to school, there are more questions about CPS's flawed data. And it's kind of two stories in one here. One being that as we're facing another COVID subvariant, CPS is not doing a great job, if a job at all, of tracking how many students are getting the booster shots. And according to CPS, they say they only track data that, is self-reported or that a vaccination that happened on school property or at a school event. But obviously that leaves a wide range of, just kind of confusion of how many students in CPS are actually up to date on vaccinations. And in that, we realize that the disparity between Black and brown schools and more affluent schools in the CPS system, it remains, and the gap is even widening with some schools only having, somewhere around a 20 or even sub 20% vaccination rate. And so, as we're continuing to try to, push back the pandemic and make sure students are safe, I feel like it's maybe a huge oversight to not know at a certain point, where students are along in the process. And in addition to that, as students are still recovering from multiple years of online learning and being out of the classroom, we know one of the biggest issues is engaging students, making sure students are coming back to class, that they're attending class. And the CPS Inspector General's annual report kind of paints a bleak picture about how CPS is doing in terms of tracking pretty much where students are. And so if students are who are truant, who are missing a lot of days of school, they're incorrectly being classified as either dropping out of school or transferring, which means CPS isn't really keeping track of where students are. And the OIG says that CPS estimates that 100,000 students are sort of in the process of needing to be re-engaged to find out, are they coming back to school? Are they officially out of school? What do they need to catch up in school? And so to know that the data, though it was gathered pre-pandemic, the Inspector General says that means it's probably worse now that CPS isn't doing a great job of keeping those classifications very clear. To CPS's point, they say they have spoken with schools, given them the correct guidelines on how to correctly classify students who are absent a lot of days versus completely saying they've dropped out or that they, have transferred schools. But right now, again, on both counts, whether it's vaccinations or whether it's absentee students, CPS is having a hard time making that data clear and available to the public.
Yeah, I think we've covered on the show a few different instances of sort of CPS data tracking. We've got kind of two different stories here. One is a sort of ongoing COVID story that we've been following pretty closely. As students return to school on Monday, I think that's part of that question as well.
This is actually a pretty perennial issue with CPS because we're talking about tracking, especially with truancy. We're talking about the fourth largest school district in the country. Finding a way to track, hundreds of thousands of students is tough. I mean, it is. I'm not saying absolve CPS, especially in the sense of the vaccinations, because I think that they said they, haven't been tracking boosters, which again might be tough because there are, privacy issues involved with that. But, this has long been an issue in CPS about the truancy issue of like, well, how, they literally would, I think, send people to these students' addresses and homes. But like, that's all been totally blown up during the pandemic when people moved, so it's both sides of it are very tough.
In some ways, in both cases, not having correct data and not having accurate data can sometimes work to CPS's benefit in the sense that, there can be penalties for having high absentee rates in your school. And so this might not just be we're doing a bad job at this. It could potentially be, there's an intentionality and maybe not shoring up this system.
Carrie, your top story is a little bit different, building on something that was happening, pretty much in the entire second half of 2022, the migrant crisis and the busing of migrants to Chicago from Texas. What's the latest on that we should be talking about?
Well, just this week, we saw that, this could both be a top story, and I think, sadly, at this point in its timeline, it's a little bit of an underreported one as well. But this resurfaced this week because the governor of Colorado, Governor Polis, Politico reported this earlier this week, that he was sending migrants from Colorado to Chicago and New York, which was, criticized by both Mayor Lori Lightfoot and then New York's Mayor Eric Adams. But Polis said, look, and the sort of next question, or, I know I said is like, but wait, isn't he a Democrat? Because we've seen with Abbott and other Republican governors.
Abbott, the governor of Texas. Yeah.
Exactly. That, Texas has been sending these people to Democratic-led states. And so it was like, wait, why is Polis doing this? Polis says that he is really, this is not about shipping anyone away, which I hate that we talk about these human beings as if they're parcels. But, but this is that many of these people, they were trying to get to New York and Chicago, so he's helping them get there. Now, the big issue for us in Chicago is like providing resources to, I think, these nearly, at this point, 4,000 migrants, I think is what Mayor Lightfoot said, right? Just Thursday, Laura Rodriguez-Presa from Chicago Tribune, she was covering a press conference of some community members in Woodlawn who were saying that, pushing back against the mayor's plan to move some of these migrants to create a shelter in a closed school in Woodlawn. They were saying, we don't want them here. And, that's tough. Like they said, we weren't consulted, which is something probably most neighborhoods can attest to, that they're not often consulted by the city and their, policymakers. But there isn't just one big space for all these people, thousands of people coming in, and they need, they need housing, they need shelter, they need food, they need care, they need resources. I think it's our job as humans to help provide it if we can. And I guess this was the mayor's solution, which got pushback from Woodlawn residents.
Not just Woodlawn residents, but also Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor of the 20th Ward, who represents that neighborhood. It's I think that's a really, really tough question, because there are, on one level, legitimate concerns of, why put a high needs population in a neighborhood that is also high needs, right? There is that question of, would you have done this to a wealthy white neighborhood on the north side?
Just to push back a little, that wasn't all they said. They also said it wasn't just in a white neighborhood. The speaker that Laura captured said, would you move Haitians to Little Village? Like, they played very much into the very true reality of the segregation of our city, in that, you wouldn't move Black people to the north side. You wouldn't move Black people to Little Village. You would, playing into this idea that we are factioned by our race in this city. Little Village is for Mexicans and Latinos, and these migrants, we should be clear, are not from Mexico. But yeah, I just wanted to say it wasn't just an issue of like South versus North. It was, they were pushing back. This person literally said, move them to Little Village.
Right. Well, so that's what I was going to say. So that said, the problem comes is when you start using wording like, move those people with their people in Little Village. And that's not just a semantic issue. That's not just an issue of words being used. Like, that is a really deep-seated, unwelcoming way to talk about the problem at hand, which is we've got 4,000 people that we need to house, feed, and clothe, that the city ostensibly is trying to welcome to the best of its ability, right, on some level. And something has to happen. Every week, we like to look at a few stories that maybe have fallen under people's radar. Carrie, this one definitely fell under my radar. I did not know this was going on. Can you tell us about what we might be seeing in our utilities in the near future? What's happening?
Yeah. Sure, Simone. Sometimes I think utilities, that makes our eyes glaze over a little bit. And then we see our bill and we're like, wait, why didn't anyone tell me about this? We're like, we did tell you about this. Nicor Gas, who provides gas for the suburbs and parts of, northern and southern Cook County, have asked for a rate hike increase to help sort of, I think the most layperson way to say it would be like modernize their system, right? And if this is approved by the Illinois Commerce Commission, this could mean almost a hike of $10 a month, which is a lot, right?
Yeah.
So People's Gas, just to be clear on names here, People's Gas is where we in Chicago proper get our gas. But they have also have hinted that they would be filing for a rate hike increase as well. I think the important thing to note on this is it is, no pun intended, one of those utility news stories that does affect each of us in terms of affecting our wallet. Sometimes inflation, I think, is this big term that we think is like, well, who cares? Who cares? Oh, wait, the groceries. Oh, my gosh, eggs are how much? Oh, my gosh, my bill is how much? Personally speaking, start of a new year, I live in a condo building, and we had to raise our monthly assessments because everything costs more. Condo insurance costs more. Our electric bill costs more, our water costs more, trash costs more. So it's like you have to keep hiking those up, and, that affects your bottom line, right? And gas is, as we know, as we're in the middle of winter, so essential, obviously, that I know for me, the colder it gets, I'm like hiking up the heat. But then I'm like, oof, looking at my gas bill and thinking of $10 more a month. I mean, that's $1,000 a year. That could really.
I mean,
really
and this would be the second rate increase. Back in November 2021, Nicor got a $240 million rate increase, which already was about $4 per month to the average individual. And for people who have People's Gas, their last rate increase came in 2014, which was distributed over 10 years. And so most of us been paying like a extra $15 surcharge on top of our bill for People's Gas last pipeline. And so them basically ending that decade agreement and starting a potential new rate increase it wouldn't be too shocking, I guess.
Yeah.
Carrie, to your point about like climate change in the winter and it's cold and you're using more gas, I am also really curious because the other thing in sort of climate is there's a push to sort of have fewer gas appliances, to not be using gas in your homes in an indoor setting. I will be curious to see if we do see rate hikes, will we see an even greater push then to be like, well, hey, why do you need a gas stove? Why not try induction? Why not try XYZ? Jacoby, what was your underhype story this week?
A story that kind of, hit me when I read it this week was about the Cook County Medical Examiner Office saying that Cook County is likely to exceed 2,000 deaths from opioid overdose. And we've covered this story in a few different ways, from the resources the city is providing to trying to increase funding for treatment options for people in the city. But we spent a lot of time talking about, like homicides in Cook County and in Chicago. But this death toll is is higher than that and doesn't nearly get the same amount of attention. And right now we're seeing across the country people trying to deal with the rise in fentanyl overdoses. And you're seeing that pop up in Chicago more and more. And I think this is important to pay attention to, not simply because the high number, but Illinois is set to receive about $760 million from a settlement where, some of the biggest drug manufacturers and distributors in the country had to pay out. They actually might get more money from the lawsuits against CVS and Walgreens and Walmart. And so the question really is, how are we going to use this money? I believe about 55% of that money will get decided by the governor. 20% and 25% will go to the state, 20% will flow down to the counties. And so while we're dealing with these record number of deaths, it's really important for us to ask, well, how are we going to make use of this settlement money? Are we going to increase treatment facilities? Are we going to provide Narcan to places beyond, the library programs that we've discussed? How are we going to provide immediate response services for people who are dealing with overdoses or have people in their family struggling with addiction? And so it doesn't have to be as much of a bleak and really sad story as this is. There is an opportunity right now for us to make some measure of impact on this crisis that's happening in our city. And so my hope is that we use this money wisely.
Every week, we like to leave the listeners not on a dark note. We like to leave the listeners with some good news. Can I get my singers here to actually sing?
Some good news.
To get us through the weekend, the year, everything. Good news all day, every day.
The hour.
This minute that you're listening to us right now.
The next 15 minutes.
Jacoby, what was some good news you want to share with the people today?
My good news this week is the announcement that Chicago will soon have its very first poet laureate. It looks like Mayor Lori Lightfoot is really trying to pack it in before we get to the election with as much good grace and doozy as possible. But this is what I'm going to have to go ahead and give.
There's a lot of arts funding happening lately. It's kind of seeping in here and there, yeah.
It just makes sense for Chicago. They say that this person will be an active participant in creating programs and being an ambassador for the city's arts programs, for bringing creativity to the communities. But also, they'll serve a 2-year term and be given a $50,000 grant. And we've talked a lot about Chicago's poetry scene in some form or fashion. I've had the great fortune to work with some amazing poets. You can nominate some of your favorite local poets online until January 18th. They got to be 21, at least 21, and live in the city of Chicago and have some published works over the last 3 years.
I was shocked that Chicago didn't already have one. I was really, really surprised that this wasn't already a thing.
Me too.
So I think I'm certainly looking forward to it, looking forward to the poetry, of course, that will come out of this. I think we could all use a little more poetry in our day-to-day, personally. That's how I feel.
We could.
I think we could all use a lot more arts funding and money to creators and creatives and artists who are the soul of our city.
For real. Carrie, what was your good news this week?
Mine isn't any sort of specific good news. It's a little mix of hope and a little mix of advice. I'm fudging a little on the assignment. So the new year is always new resolutions. We want to, live healthier lifestyles, right? Emotionally healthy, self-care, everything. This time of year, as a certifiable former gym rat, someone who went to the gym all the time before the pandemic, embrace the new gym goers that start at the top of the year.
Yes.
They're often people who make snide remarks because you can't get a locker. The classes are overwhelmed, and don't do that. Everybody deserves a chance and a right to be healthy and to take care of themselves in whatever way that looks like. So embrace them and welcome them. The Park District they offer free exercise classes and nutrition programs across the city.
By the way, it is shocking how many classes the Parks District offers.
They do. And their nutrition programs, a lot of nonprofits do the same thing. And this is whatever healthier looks like to you, but make space for those people, make space for everyone who's trying to take care of themselves. As my mom always says, we're nothing without our health. It is a great gift to be able to move our bodies. And so make sure you don't give snide remarks to the gym newbies and welcome them in.
I love that advice.
That is really sweet.
I think that's really good advice. And I think in general, also just good. Don't begrudge anyone their attempts to improve themselves.
I'm with that. Simone, what is your some good news?
My good news this week is, so as I alluded to a little bit earlier, I got COVID over the holiday and was in quarantine for several days in my mother's house. That's not the good news. The good news is just the sort of gratitude I feel for now being healthy, fully recovered, didn't put too much of a damper on my life overall. And I know everyone had a lot of trouble traveling over the holidays. I had the best luck that literally anyone has ever had traveling over the holidays. Just grateful for the good things that did happen over the holiday break. That's my good news.
I just want to give another thank you to lead producer Carrie Shepard for joining us today, producer Simone Alicia for walking us through our Friday look back. I want to thank our producer Meg Dalton, who you don't hear from, but she is in the back making all of this work. I want to thank our newsletter writer Sydney Madden, who all of the stories you heard today, at some point this week, Sydney had to read it and she sent it to me to make sure that I read it. And so without Sydney, CityCast Chicago does not move. CityCast Chicago also doesn't work without the people who make our music. All them little stingers you heard today, that theme music, them horns still hitting almost 2 years later. And that's because my main man, Sam Thousand, the homies, all the kimonos, and the great Mark Greenberg of the Mayfair Workshop. Thank y'all for everything y'all have given us here at CityCast Chicago, just to make the sound even more smooth. Of course, CityCast Chicago is not what it is without the people who listen and read every single day, every single week. It means a lot to us. 2023 is going to be a great year. Let us know what you think we should talk about this year. Send us a message at 773-780-0246. What's the Chicago topic you want CityCast to cover? And we're going to do our best to do it. We'll talk to you on Monday. Peace. Join us next week when we will be sitting down with Mayor Lori Lightfoot and Benny the Bull. See you then.
That's not happening.
That's
for the record.
Not happening.